So it's time to put on your virtual wellies and pack your virtual lunch because we're going on our virtual field trip. Let's get going! Okay, I really must stop doing those YouTuber intros, mustn't it? Well, anyway, let's get back to the serious business of a good geographical field trip. We're taking a look at how rivers change as you move downstream. Now, it's one thing to look at graphs and so forth that show that, but it's a whole other thing actually to go in and experience that. And what better to help us experience it than our good friend the GIS map. So whenever you go into your presentation, you'll be able to open up this map and it will take you into this. Now I'm going to pay a little visit down here to this other river before we come up here to the Glendun River, which will be the main one. And this is our friend, the Downstream River, which we looked at in an earlier task. So if we come in here, because I just want to give a little bit of a sense of this river as it changes downstream. You can see pretty much the whole of the river here, starting up here in the Mourns, coming down through the valley and coming out to the sea here at Downstream itself. It's one of the shorter rivers in Northern Ireland. The distance between the source and the mouth is very, very limited. But it allows us to really get a sense of what some of those changes will be as you move downstream. So it starts up here off the side of the castles of Cometa, as they're called, these crags that are desiccated here and dissected here by the rivers that are coming down. And there's a little path that runs across here. If you've ever walked across this path here, the gravel that you walk over sometimes is some of this material that's brought down from the source of the river. So this is the source of it. So you can see that the river here is very narrow and the sides of it are very steep. Then it comes down into the bottom of this valley. This is the Downstream Valley, and we'll get a bit of a sense of what happens here. Still, the valley sides are reasonably steep, but this was carved out by a glacier, so the bottom of the valley has been widened out a little bit. And you can see that as it comes down here, the valley gets wider and wider compared to what it was at the start, and it's slightly less steep here. The river's beginning to meander a little bit here, and then as it comes out of the Mourns itself, I'll zoom out a little bit, it comes down here along the Downstream Wood. So if you've ever parked at Carricklitttle car park and gone up to Buzzard Roost or up here to Binion, those kinds of places, you've walked right past it. In fact, you cross over the river at this part here. There's the little path that goes over the river just as you're coming to this point. So as you're coming up here, there is the river. Now, as it comes into the coastal plain here, you can see that it levels out an awful lot more, comes onto this floodplain, and the river meanders more and more as it comes down towards the mouth here. Now, this river never gets particularly wide because it's a relatively short river, but the river width will be wider as it gets down here towards the mouth than it was near the source. So there is the Downstream River, just giving you a little bit of a feel for that river as it changes downstream. But the river that we're going to be actually collecting data in here is a river up here towards the northeast of County Antrim, and it starts here on top of the Antrim Plateau and it flows downhill and into the sea here at Glendun. So let's come down and have a little bit of a look upstream. Similar to what we've just looked at, here's your floodplain. You can see the river's definitely meandering more here, and you can see that the width and the gradient is low. The gradient is lower and the floodplain is wider here. So if we go up towards the source and look downstream, then you can see the difference there. You can see the steeper, narrower valleys compared to down here. So that's a little bit of an overview of it first of all. So what you're going to do is to come in here and to go through basically what we call the geographical process of inquiry. This is very similar to what you're going to be doing in your paper 3 exam when we do the Colin River. Data planning for what you're going to be doing, data collection, presenting your data, analysing and interpreting it. Now, these last two we're not going to be doing in this exercise, but you're going to be doing these ones on the way through. So the first thing that you'll do, based on what I've covered in the video so far, describe where the Glendun River is in Northern Ireland, and then describe the overall course shown in that slide. and that slide there. So what is it, just as your general sense of the river at that point. Then you're going to move in to do some of your planning here. It's your planning section here where you're going to set some hypotheses to test. This is kind of like what you do in science. You come up with a hypothesis, which is a statement of what the theory says should happen that you're going to test. A statement of what the theory says should happen that you're going to test. So from your notes, you need to go in and copy and paste those in here and just fill in those blanks. What is it that you would expect river width to do as distance from the source increases? Depth, gradient, and sinuosity. Go and find those in your notes and pop those in there. Next, we're going to move on to collecting your data, and this is where this GIS map is really going to come into its own. The slides down at the bottom, you hover over those and they'll come up, and we're going to go and visit survey site number 1. Come down here, and wow, lo and behold, there are the data points that are appearing mapped in here for you. Now, these blue lines represent the width, and they're basically graphs on the landscape. How cool is that? The taller the bar, the deeper the depth, and the lighter the color, the shallower the depth. The smaller, lighter, or shallower, the taller, darker, or deeper and wider. So you get a real sense of how the river is changing as you move downstream, and this data, rather than just sitting on a graph somewhere, is actually put into the landscape. But we want to come to survey site number 1. Now, this is mapping for you the width, but if you click on here, what you will see is that you've also got the depth in here. You've got the width in meters and the depth in centimeters. So you've got that data there. And what you then need to do is to collect that data and to plot it. So for that, you're going to be going in and opening up this spreadsheet. And when you go into the spreadsheet, it's going to look like this. Now, it's mostly laid out for you. In fact, I have put the first one in here really just to give us something to draw, because I've got this all set up that everything auto calculates for you. All the graphs will draw automatically for you. So this should be a really straightforward process. You just go in and you collect that data. So there it was. The width was 2.7, the average depth was 14, and there it is in there for you. And that first point is now plotted onto the graph. So as you go down all of the other points, the next one you'll go to is survey site number 2. You'll do the same thing. You'll click on that. There's your boxes coming up, and you'll just work your way down the river valley like that, and you'll collect the data in each of those at each stage, and you just fill that in and the graph will automatically draw itself. So once you've done that and presented your data, you'll have the graph produced for you, and then we're going to come into our analysis of the data. What's it showing? So in this slide, I want you to state your completed version of hypothesis number 1. River width does what as you move downstream? Fill that in there. Then I want you to paste your graph in here. Now to copy your graph, you just click on it down there, and you can download as a PNG, and then you can just paste that in here. And then I want you to describe the graph using the template as distance from the source increase, river width does what? What's the graph show? And then you're going to quote figures from at least 2 points, and then anomalies. These are important things that stand out from the trend. There may or may not be anomalies. If there aren't any anomalies, if there aren't things that are very different from the trend, that's fine. You don't need to put those in, but it's always important to mention those if needs be. So that's hypothesis number 1. You do the same for hypothesis number 2, which is to do with your river width. Now, the other thing that you need to be doing and collecting on the way down, I'll come back in here to survey site number 1. I want us to get something of the angle of the slope and the gradient as you move downstream. So for that one, you're going to be using the Analyze tool. So you come over here to the toolbar, you click on the Analyze tool. Okay, and there's the contours moving around. And what I want you to do is click on the spot and then we're going to move up the slope. Now we're going to move 500 meters away from the river, so you need to be moving this out until the top measurement there is about 500 meters. It doesn't need to be absolutely 500 meters as long as it's nearly 500 meters. So in this case it's 449 or 499.64, and the height that you have gained, if you were to walk 500 meters away from the river, you would have walked up 181.21 meters, right? So you then take that in and you put that in there. Now I took the measurement previously with that, it's slightly different, but it'll be close to that kind of thing. Now this will automatically calculate the gradient for you. That's why there looks to be an error there, because there's no data in there yet. You collect that then for survey point number 2, and once you've collected that for survey point number 2, let's go to it, click on there, and we're going to move 500 meters away from the river again, something like that. Double click and there's your data there. So you just keep going down the different survey points and you collect that data and pop that in there, and that's going to draw your graph for you here. And the final thing that we're going to be doing is to analyse the sinuosity as you move downstream. A river should become more sinuous as you move downstream, more meanders developing. For this, we're going to go into a different GIS map. It's this one here. And when you click on that, it'll open this one up for you. And here is the Glendun in this case. So what we're interested in doing now is using the measure tool, and we're going to measure a couple of distances. I'm going to demonstrate this. We're going to measure straight line distance and actual river distance. So let me demonstrate how we're going to do that. So one of the ones that you will do in here is between survey point 7 and the river mouth. So if I show you that, that's survey point 7 there, it's the very last one, survey site 7. Now the straight line distance, I come up here to the measure tool, find this, and I go simply from here to here. That's my straight line distance. But you will notice here that the river doesn't flow in a straight line, the river meanders. So how are we going to measure that? So again, the measure tool. This time, click, 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 and every time the river changes direction, you click there and you just follow it down bit by bit all the way towards the end. And if you keep going, I'll not do the rest of it, but you could imagine we'll do the rest of it roughly like that down towards the end. You do it much more precisely, double click to finish, and there's your total. Then whenever you go into your spreadsheet, this time it's the second table down here. So between, in this case that was site 7 in the mouth, there was the straight line distance and then the actual distance, and again that is calculated for you, and you'll be able to then draw the graph and copy and paste that in as well, and you pop that in there and then you describe the graph using the template. So by the time you've done that, you'll have an opportunity to have really explored this river. And again, because this is a GIS map, do explore it. I mean, you're in charge. I've got slides to tell you, roughly where to go, but go and explore it. Get a real sense of this river and what it feels and looks like as it moves downstream. How is it changing? Get a real sense of it. Go and explore it. And hopefully by the time you've done that it'll really bring this to life for you. This will not just simply be a series of statements about rivers and what they do, but it will bring it to life. And it'll be a really good preparation as well for our paper 3, which is all about that, when we don't only don our virtual wellies, but our actual wellies, when we go actually up to the top of the Colin River over Belfast and jump in the river and do all sorts of really exciting geography. Hopefully this will be a good preparation for that.